Kajo, this is a panel of skeptics when it comes to smart subsidies. They want them smart, smarter, smartest. I look to you to put a few challenges before our skeptical panel. 5 minutes, Kajo.
I'll first of all try to give two definitions of what smart subsidies mean. Smart subsidies are development interventions designed to be a monetary grant or support of some other kind by government or others working in the public interest that are aimed specifically so that the subsidy is both supportive of market development and is pro-poor, in that it enhances the welfare or reduces the economic vulnerability of the poor. Or it has also been suggested that the below market cost provision of goods and services that the poor in particular are likely to benefit from can be considered smart subsidies. I was working with the Minister of Agriculture in Ghana in the late 80s when subsidies were removed over a 3-year period by the instructions of the World Bank. And I saw fertilizer consumption plummet about 30%, during that period. And these are very poor farmers who were using fertilizer to increase their incomes and also to improve their food security. And we can imagine what happened. I hear Karen talking about Malawi and things like that, but we don't look at the issues of food security or what it does to poor people's incomes if the fertilizer subsidy is not there. Have we learned any lessons from India and other Asian countries when the Green Revolution was on, when fertilizer subsidies was one of the major tenets of the Green Revolution? Are there any lessons that we have learned? Nick was talking about the private sector, cultivating the private sector, but he fell short of talking about capacity strengthening. If there is no private sector, we need to develop the private sector before it can pick up. Most of these countries, the private sector doesn't exist. So if you have to implement a program, then you need to find a way of building the private sector up. So capacity strengthening of the private sector becomes very important. The Third World Network advocates for organic farming, where they don't use any inorganic fertilizers. Are we thinking about that? People are saying integrated soil fertility management, where you combine organic fertilizer versus inorganic fertilizer. Are we thinking about as a way of replacing the blatant use of fertilizer, which is also environmentally unsound? We are saying that it must be economically sound, but must also look at how it can also contribute to the environment. Now, the Abuja Conference Summit said that we should go back and use subsidies. I think this is something that the African countries have decided upon. I think what we need to do is to try to work out how we can implement this policy. Otherwise, if we don't, people will get policies up and then the policies do not work. It's not a matter of not implementing subsidies, but how can we get the subsidies going in the right way? Balu was talking about moving the supply curve, increasing supplies. But how do you do that? Some countries are only 5 million, 10 million. These are small markets. How do we get countries to cooperate among themselves so that when the supply increases, at least there must be an accompanying demand to purchase the fertilizer? So it's not just a matter of increasing the supply. We have said that Nick was saying that in 3 countries, the fertilizer consumption increased after subsidies were removed. By 8 countries, it fell. How do we, 5 countries, including Ghana, how do we look at this? What lessons do we learn? How did it increase in those 3 countries? How did it decrease in the 5 countries? I think there are lessons that we need to learn so that we can move on with this. This has been a very interesting topic. It is a topic that interests some of us. And I think that we should be looking at this in the terms as to how it helps to increase food security and then reduce poverty. The economic and social costs of a fertilizer subsidy program can be high. from lower spending on social programs like health and education. Yes, we are saying that, but then you need to balance it out and see what is more important in terms of spending 3 to 5% of your budget on subsidies versus not spending it at all. I will give you a quotation from MS Swaminathan, which was done in 2008. He said, members of the OECD spend more than $1 billion a day in support of the agricultural sectors. But then somebody from the World Bank comes to India and says, and I quote, "You are giving too many subsidies to fertilizer." How does one reconcile the two situations? At the same time, more than 50% of the population in developing countries depends on agriculture for their livelihoods. These are the poor people, they are in the marginal areas, and they are in remote areas. There has to be some method of protecting them, or they will not be able to compete. Unquote. This is Swaminathan. I think you all know him. I would like just to say that it is important to maybe protect to some extent, but we need to make sure that the protection is not going against some very important program. So there's a need for some protection, there's a need for some subsidies, but the subsidies will have to be done right. But to say that let's eliminate subsidies in general and look at only the supply side, I think is not the answer. How do we balance the two to make sure that development of agriculture goes on and then food security increases and poverty reduces?